Hey, just figured I'd say, if you want to go directly to the start of the tutorial, go to around 3 minutes and like 36 seconds, and that'll get you to around when I start, and you missed my little spiel, so goodbye. Wow, that was insane! Hey, it's me! It's been a little bit of time, and I actually haven't really been making a whole bunch of big videos recently, and I thought to myself I probably should be doing that because I've just been making tiny little shorts, which, I mean, what the hell's the point in that, right? I've been busy on some projects and some other stuff involving both school and other random things that I've been doing, but I thought that I should probably end up coming back and doing something a little bit bigger so I could actually, you know, make content. I don't know why I make content. I don't exactly get paid for it. I know it's a hobby and that it's a lot of fun, but I mean, honestly, it's not like I need to. I don't need to at all. But the channel has grown, like, a little bit. I mean, I'm at 145 subscribers now. Yeah, good job. Thank you. You know, I actually procrastinated for so long in editing this video that I actually gained almost 20 subscribers in that period of time. So I'm at like 164 now, something like that. So thank you to everyone who did that. But I'm going to be editing things a lot faster now because I know that if I don't do that, then I'll just never edit them at all. Yeah, I realize it's not the biggest number in the world, but you know what? It's still 145 people. That's enough to fill up a couple rooms worth of people in most given places. So, you know, I'm honestly pretty happy with that. I'm not gonna bore you today. I'm gonna be ended up making a sculpture as usual, and it's gonna be a bit of fun because it's gonna be a nice one. It's something different than the typical Friday Night Funkin' stuff I've been working on usually. I'm going on to Deltarune Chapter 2 because I've played the game and I really enjoy it. For example, yesterday I sculpted Rouse because I thought that would be something that would be fun to do, and it turned out pretty good I mean, I think it turned out well. I definitely think that it was nice. It was worth the 4 hours up until 5 in the morning. When I get started on a project, I don't stop because I know for a fact that if I don't finish it, I'm gonna procrastinate and never finish it. So I started it at like 1 a.m. a little later than I would have normally done it, but what the hell, why not? And then I worked all the way up to about 5:30. But you know what? Look at him. He's pretty adorable. I'd say that it's definitely worth the time. Which brings me to the next day where I'm already planning on making another sculpture. I think that I'm going to actually take just a little bit of time today and try to make 2 of them because the same character has 2 different forms within the game. That character which being Spamton G Spamton, who is essentially just a salesman. Deltarune Chapter 2 is very, like, computer themed on the internet and everything like that, so the main character is just a computer, like, literally just a flat-out computer in the form of a queen type thing. You get the idea. She's out there, though. She's trying to take over the world. Typical game. You get the whole gist of that. And essentially, it's all, yeah, as said, it's all computer-related things. So there's one character, that being Spamton, who is essentially a spam email in the form of a salesman, which I find to be a very creative twist on what the thing could have been, so I definitely respect it highly from Toby Fox. Look at him, he looks so goofy. He just needs a good old guy, but I'm planning on making both the regular version of Spamton and the secret boss in the game, and the secret Neo Spamton, which is a callback to the original game of Undertale where the character Metaton turned into Metaton Neo halfway through. Nah, you get the idea. They Metaton Neo. Robot, normal robot goes to big robot. That means Metaton, normal robot, Neo, big robot. Get the idea? Good. So I'm sure you now understand the point of what I'm going to be doing today. I'm going to be both sculpting the regular Spamton and the Neo version, and then I'm going to be playing his boss music in the background, which I feel will definitely suit the video better than most of the other songs I've been doing, so it'll very well be a good time. So we'll get to the voiceover and everything you need to do to make this guy. Hello there and welcome to the voiceover. The first thing I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be taking a big old ball of random colored clay because of course you're not going to see the inside of this sculpture when you're making it, or at least when it's done. You're not going to see the inside of it. So the concept is take a bunch of mismatched colors of clay and you stick them all into one big old ball, and that's your filler clay, as I used to call it. You proceed to take that filler clay and roll it into a large cylinder, which you would then roll out and then put onto the desk, and then kind of crush the little tops of it a bit so that you could give it some flatness to it, which creates the body, because then you can smush down the edges of it, which would make the little indent inwards of Spamton's body. And the same thing goes for his head, where you then take a cylinder of clay and then you crush the top of it a little bit to make it flat. You cut off some of the excess clay to round it out, and you do the same thing all the way around it up until you get, you know, just the same look of Spamton's head that you would in the game. Because Spamton's head has 2 bits that stick outwards, you could then just take 2 little tiny pieces of clay and then press them onto the sides, which would then make that little extra outside bulge on each side. But to put the black on the body, I took a clay roller machine that I had, and I stuck some black clay inside of it to make a black sheet of clay, which I then wrapped around the sides of Spamton's body, and I cut out a little triangle in the middle at the top of it to create that little white part of his body. And for his face is essentially cut out a rectangle of white clay, which you could then
then stick on to the face, would then push the top sides inwards to make a triangle, which would then form the nose. And you could then cut it to size and make it look as closely to the photos that you get as possible, which is one thing I do recommend getting a bunch of reference photos when you create this, because, well, obviously you're going to need something to base it off of. The rest of it is essentially just rinse and repeat, where you take black sheets of clay, you roll them out, you stick them together by smoothing them over with your fingers, which allows them to have no seams left that are visible on them. It's a very simple thing. I just recommend getting the clay rolling machine. It's like $30, but it's worth every penny because it's used for me in every single clay figure I make. But one thing I'd specify is the brand Sculpey III clay. That's a very useful thing because that's the only clay I really use at this point, because it's just the most effective, and I find it to be the most consistent in however I buy it. I know that was a bit fast, but I'll explain my methods in the next bit when I go into Spamton Neo, because I know that I went very fast in this, but don't you worry, because this next little time-lapse thing is like 10 minutes. God damn it! So we're going to take everything we learned from the previous bit and we're going to amplify it to a very high degree in this one. To start off, I make the aluminum armature, which I make for most of my figurines that are actually, you know, large enough to require it. It's a bunch of aluminum wire that's around 3 millimeters in diameter that I then take with my pliers and I bend it into the shape of the finished product. So in whatever pose I'm going to be putting Spamton in, I then bend that wire to be in that pose to build clay off of it. So I can have a base layer, which I can then put all the clay that is on the outside layer directly on top of that. By this I mean I take clay and put it directly over the top of the armature to then form the, you know, the volume of the actual figure. So for Spamton's legs, I take a cylinder that I roll out of random colored clay, which I then will take the black clay that is his legs, the outer layer of it, and I then roll that over top of the random colored clay. Because as said, you are not going to see the insides of the legs or the figure. So if you have the legs that are black, you make the insides a random color and then put black over the top of it so you don't waste black clay on the inside. That's what I'm doing right now for the red part, which is going to be his arm, which I'm now mixing currently to make the actual color, because I don't have that color. So one thing you can do with the polymer clay is you can mix it like paint. It just takes a lot longer and is a lot more tiresome. But in the long run, mixing the clay is a very well worth process because you get the correct color rather than a shade that's somewhat close to it. That's what I did for the wings in a little bit from now. And yeah, if I didn't mix the clay, I really would not have had anything that looks like regular Spamton's wings. They'd look like his wings, but the colors and the shades would just be off. It would not have looked nearly as, I think, professional as it does at the very end of this. But yes, the whole concept is you mix the colors to then put over the top of whatever you're making. So Spamton's arms, I then took the cylinder of random colored clay I mentioned before, and I cut a little slit through it, which I then put over the top of the armature wire, and then smoothed over with my fingers to connect so that I would be able to at least keep it on there. And then you wrap a little sheet of red clay over top of the cylinder and smooth it over again. It's the same concepts really, just amplified over every different part of the figure. So it makes it somewhat simple once you get into the rhythm of things. Once you do something once, you can do it again and then repeat it for every single piece of the figure. Speaking of which, to make Spamton's feet, I took just a random colored blob of clay and I rolled it into a cylinder, and then I pinched the end of it to make a point, and then I cut a slit through the inside of it and then put it over top of that little piece of wire at the bottom of it to make his feet. And then I rolled white clay over the top of that. As for actually mixing the colors that I mentioned earlier, I wanted to say it's essentially just eyeballing it. I mean, there's no real way to know how it's going to look once you're done mixing it. Just add what you think is going to make the color look how it should, and then keep going from there. You'll end up with a lot of clay by the end of it, which is very helpful. I'm creating the front of the body now, which is essentially a bunch of colored triangles, and the way that you would do that is you take a bunch of colored sheets of clay. Say if you want to make a red triangle, you'd take a couple sheets of that red clay, put them on top of each other, and then you would look in an above view, and then you'd cut a triangle out of that however it looks in the image. And then you do the same for the other side since it's symmetrical. I cannot talk, sorry. And to make the little bits of the edges, because the triangles would have sharp edges, of course, you would cut those edges at a 45-degree angle down the sides of them, which you can then just roll out with your hands or a tool or whatever you really have. I've said in a couple other videos before where you take certain other tools and then you use those to help you with the clay. All you really need, in my personal opinion, are little rubber tools with the little bits that are rubber at the end of it to round out the clay, and an X-Acto knife. That's genuinely all you need to start out, but I would highly recommend also buying that clay roller as mentioned before because it's real helpful. We are now on to the head, which is the same process as making the last one, where you take a big ball of random colored clay and then cover it with white, except this time I made the mouth a lot bigger, and instead of having it be where it was just stuck on the front of the face, I actually cut out the inside of the mouth stuff. So it was essentially taking a big rectangle piece of clay and sticking it directly onto the bottom of the head, and then I cut out the insides of that rectangle and filled it with black clay and covered the outsides with white. So that kind of gave it the impression of having a mouth that actually is open rather than just having a mouth that is stuck directly onto the face like I did for regular Spamton. As for the teeth, it's the same exact concept. You get the drill by now, where you take a rectangular piece of white clay, you cut that out, and you take one of those rectangles and stick it on the bottom and one of them on the top, and you can affix that with wire on the insides of it, where you poke it into the top of the head and then you poke the wire into the tooth as well to kind of hold it in place. To make the nose, it's just taking a cylinder of white clay, pinching the top of it to make it into a more triangular shape, and then you pinch the end of it to make the pointed part of the nose. And to make the eyes, it is where you take a piece of yellow and pink clay, you roll that in the clay roller, and then you proceed to cut out two circles from each one of, or one circle from each one of them, apologies there, and stick it directly onto the face. Spamton's eyes also have a little black border around the edge of them, which you can make by taking a really thin piece of black clay and rolling it out into a real thin line, which you can then wrap around the edges of the eyes. And that's how you make the things of the glasses too, which you take that small little line that you made, and then you also put a small piece of it in between his eyes to make those glasses. And for his hair, which you then see that I just created, it was just a bunch of little cylinders of clay that I made that I then took the ends and made points out of, so I just rolled the ends of the cylinders on my fingers, and then I stuck 9 of them together on a black sheet of clay. So you can see that in the video right now at the top of his head. It's literally just 9 little pointed cylinders on top of a sheet of black clay, which I then stuck directly on the top of his head. And on the back of his head, you have the rest of his hair, which is just a black little sheet of clay directly over the back of it, which I then took another piece and bent it back to make the little L shape for his hair. The phone that he has in his hand is a cylinder of white clay that I wrapped the ends around and made them slightly thicker on the ends, and then cut little notches to make the details for the phone. The hands were just a piece of white clay that was a rectangle originally, and I beveled the corners to kind of make them more rounded, and then his thumb is a small cylinder of white clay that you then bend around the top. And for the little blasting mechanism, it's the same thing. You just take a big old ball of random colored clay, you roll the little sheets of clay over the top of it to make those colors, and that's all you really need to do for it. I had to make a completely separate armature for each wing, where I took a piece of wire and made it into a flag shape and took the respective colors for each wing, and I put one layer on the bottom and one layer on the top to stick them all together. And it was just the colors that you see in the images, and it's basically just completely copying off the image. That's the whole gist of everything here. It's like copying a photo where you draw it based on a reference photo. It's that, but in 3D. I built this figure to stand up originally, but I wanted to make it hang on my wall, so I took the children's CAD program Tinkercad and I proceeded to make a little thing for it. I put the file onto Cura, I then take that file, I drag it directly over onto my desktop, drag it into the printer, bing bada boom, it starts printing and we're good to go. It's been a couple days and I've ended up finishing this little bit thing here. It's very good. I'm very happy with how it turned out. It weighs a heck ton. It's very nice. But honestly, in all fairness, I didn't think I would be doing it this late into the week, but you know, it's a lack of motivation kind of just struck me. Like, I wanted to get it done, of course. It's just the fact that, like, whenever I have a huge project like this kind of presented directly in front of my face, if I don't do it all in one night, then I tend to just put it off for a bit, and I did that with this, so I'm gonna finish it up right now, which involves me going back into the voice chat, polishing it down, and then we're gonna get it right back up onto there, because I ended up creating a little thing that I can hang it up on. So back on in we go! This bit is literally just me taking some gloss glaze that the company Sculpey sells and painting it onto the figure with a paintbrush, and that's all this bit really is. But essentially, when I said earlier that it's just like copying with a reference photo, that's all it really is. It's like drawing onto another sheet of paper with a reference, but this time you just are using real clay and making it in real life. And that's all it really is. You just do it over time, repeatedly, and eventually you get the hang of it. I've been doing it for 4 years, and that's the best advice I can give. It's just like drawing with a reference photo. Oh yes, I'm going to play this video again so I can explain how I actually hung up Spamton. The 3D model I made was just a rectangular piece of plastic with one hole on the left and one hole on the right, and it was about the width of the wire. So I'd wrap one wire around Spamton's left arm, it would go through the left hole through the piece of plastic, it would go over the top through the right hole, and then back down and wrap around Spamton's right arm, which would then be able to be put on a wall hook. Which brings us to now, where I have hung up Spamton directly on my wall, and I have both of them kind of just sitting here having the best of times of their lives. So regular Spamton, we've got him over here, and then big, you know, we've got him. That's the whole gist of this video. I just made Spamton. I have a couple of other Deltarune figures that I'll be planning on making soon, so once I'm done with, you know, some other stuff I'll be making, I'm gonna be making some more stuff with Deltarune, and it's gonna be fun, I'm sure. Anyhow, I hope that kind of was, you know, informative and enjoyable. So whoever wants to make Spamton, this is a little bit of a thing to tell you how. So, yeah, good time, goodbye.